Hi, this is Elliot Fishman, and we're live on Facebook Live, and it is 7 o'clock, and some of you may wonder, why are we doing this at 7 a.m. in the morning? Well, that's a good question. It's not that we're not up. I'm always at work by 6:45. This morning I am home, but we one of the things that we remember on Facebook Live is that 80% of our users on Facebook Live, or just Facebook in general, are from non-North America people. And so many of you are in different time frames, and whether you're in Europe, or you're in Asia, or you're in Australia, South America, you name it, we have people in Antarctica, we have people from all over. So we thought maybe with our last two lectures of the year, we would actually do it early, and sort of as a bonus to you guys, so you don't have to stay up too late, or you just will watch us on reruns. So of course, anything we do in Facebook Live, one of the good things about Facebook Live, it's always there, right? So it's whether it's live or not, I guess the big advantage is you can ask me questions. So that's a hint. If you have questions, you can ask me at any time. The other thing is that we also put the Facebook Lives on YouTube, so it's also there for posterity. Anyway, we're kind of coming to the end of the year. I hope everybody is safe. This is obviously not your typical end of year. Many of you would be away, whether it's someplace warm or someplace cold, whether it's with friends or with family, and this year we're supposed to be staying home. And hopefully most of you are going to follow those directions. The vaccine is starting. God knows why it's taking so long to get started, but hopefully that will pick up speed, because the numbers are just terrible, as you know, and everyone's concerned that the worst is yet to come, particularly with people. It's tough to stay home for the holidays, but need to follow the rules. This talk, actually, the title is going to be AI, so I thought I would look a little bit about AI and kind of where it is and where it's going, quite frankly. And I think 2020 has been a good year for AI. I think if RSNA would have happened in person, you would have had a much better feel, particularly of where AI is and how the changes that it will make are coming full speed ahead. I know personally we've been putting a lot of effort into Felix project, which is moving along. It's going to enter its 5th year on early detection of pancreatic cancer, or earlier detection of pancreatic cancer. And you could see that if done correctly, AI can pick up 95% of small lesions, which means it's better than radiologists and surely can help radiologists. And again, the key thing for me is helping. You do see that different companies like AI Doc and Zebra keep getting approvals by the FDA. I think, if I remember correctly, and I won't be wrong, but Zebra had its 7th approval this year. So you are seeing a lot of things coming. I think one of the things we've spoken about before is so much of where AI is in this triage type process, where it gets a bit easier to be accepted by the FDA because you're worrying about triage. You're not really worrying about anything more than triage. So, for example, for brain bleeds, what it's trying to do is saying, well, let's look at things earlier. We have a work list that moves it to the front of the work list, and that saves 40 minutes in a busy practice. It also is very good at showing you where it thinks the bleed is, and so some of the articles I've seen show that not only is it triaging patients and saving time, roughly 40 minutes, but it's also making it that since it marks the images, people are less likely to miss things, and that's particularly true with residents, but also with faculty, since all of us do miss things. I think what you are seeing also is a lot of work being done in terms of AI as a helper. I think people like Siemens and GE and some smaller companies have some new apps where it's not sort of brilliant, but it's, let's say, looking at a chest CT, and it'll give you the AP diameter, cardiac silhouette size. It'll give you the size of the aorta at the root, the mid-aorta, ascending, descending, arch. It'll give you a lot of things that you typically will measure. It also will measure them over multiple time points, so that it's much easier to have a structured report, or it's much easier to give more accurate information. Also, I think one of the things with how people measure an aortic aneurysm, and it's hard to, depending how tactic the aorta is, you can overcall if you're not careful, because you need to look at a center line, not just what's on an axial view. So the computer can do that very well, and it can get rid of a lot of the inter-observer variability, and I think that may make things a little bit easier. But also, since you're going to have to measure it, you can give a quick look to make sure the computer's correct, see where it's marked things, and then go from there. So I think things like that, things that do things for you, whether it's potentially volumetrics, whether it's length of organs, numbers, things that are numbers, whether it's counting ribs for you instead of you counting the ribs, trying to figure out where the med is or where the fracture is, whether it's counting vertebral bodies so that you're, again, it's an easier thing to do. All of those things become very, very valuable. And I think that's where you're seeing AI is being pushed. It's being pushed into things that will help the radiologist and not replace the radiologist. I think also you're seeing a lot of AI being used, being built into the scanners, helping you pick the ideal protocol for a patient, both in terms of the KVP and the MAS. How do you maximize the quality of the image? Why decrease or minimize the radiation dose? Those things become very important. I think also you're seeing AI being used in exam selection. So for example, you are going to see more of AI in the ER setting. If the patient has such and such symptoms, the computer will say what the best study to do is, what will give you the most bang for the buck. And so your ability, or the ability for referring clinicians to choose the right imaging examination becomes important. Now let's see, I'm looking at my question list, not to change the subject, but David Hine from Lansing, Michigan, hello, and Tito Herbert from Sao Paulo, Brazil. So that kind of is a pretty good spread of places. I think also one of the things that's going to be a challenge in terms of AI is retraining people. So first of all, the majority of radiologists are going to be people who are out in practice for greater than 5 years, and so they need to be retrained. Now, of course, you could say that's not that big a deal, and it really isn't, because, for example, many people were not trained in CT or MR, and they were trained after they were in practice already. I think an important thing will be that residencies begin to train people now. I think that's a very important thing. So you need to be training the people who are in training, and then later on train the people who are in practice. So that becomes very important as well. One of the things we speak about with AI will be some of the training. Now, what you need to have is, this is kind of a bad sounding term, but AI for dummies. And I think I'd put myself in the dummy category, because you're not looking to have AI for computer scientists or people who are experts. You want AI for the rest of the people. It's good to have a person in your group who's an expert in AI or expert in computers, but at the end of the day, everyone needs to have a certain level of expertise to really make it worthwhile, that people will use the stuff and people will feel comfortable. So you need the diffusion of the technology. And we had been starting that in some of our CT courses. I've been giving a lecture on AI for a while now, but it's important to remember that that's all good and everything, but you need to, but now there's no meetings. So how do you do that? By the way, I have my official 43 sweatshirt on. 43 is not the president that I wanted to be, but that was my Little League number when I played baseball. But I think that becomes very, very important. So now, oh yes, I should mention that we are going to have a CME course. We've done 36 straight years in Orlando or Miami. President's Weekend. On President's Weekend, which will be Saturday, February 13th, we're not going to have our usual 3 or 4 day course. We're going to have a 1-day course. It's going to be sponsored in great part by GE, and we thank GE for their support. And then in the sponsorship, we will charge a nominal fee for CME. If you don't want CME, I think it'll be roughly 9 or 10 CME credits. I'm not positive of the final number. But if you want CME, be you're a tech or a doc, I think it'll be something like $50 to $100, which will cover the cost of CME. But if you want to just listen to the lectures will be live on the 13th, And then there'll be a site, I think both on CTisus, but mainly the Hopkins CME site, where you can go and listen to it at any time. And I think I finished the program last night, so it'll be roughly 10 lectures. So we'll let you know a little bit more about that in the beginning of the year. We are trying to just finalize the details. It'll kind of be nice. It'll be like an 8 to 4:30 lectures, 10 lectures, a number of Q&A sessions. So we'll kind of make the best of what we can do. I think I'd rather be in Disney in Orlando, which we always are. And we, like I said, we've done it for 36 straight years. This year is not going to happen. Um, but we'll do the best we can, and hopefully, I'm not sure if we'll be able to do it in Orlando in 2022. That will be the hope, but we'll have to see how things go. And if not, we'll be 2023, or later in 2022. So now, let me go back in terms of AI. Several things in where you can learn things on CTisus, our main, not Facebook, our main website. There's a whole section we've developed on AI. There's a lot of good lectures. I put a lot of things from the literature in there, a lot of important things, some lectures, some discussions, technical terms, a lot of interesting stuff from NVIDIA, who's the leader in AI. So we have a lot of that stuff available. So I think that's something you should be and can be looking at, and we constantly are putting that up. So that's not so that's a really good thing. The other thing in terms of AI, when you ask the question about where do we see AI coming in, I mentioned in the triage. I think the triage is very important. I mentioned in the measuring, so quantification, things that we do routinely. I think AI is going to be very important in that regard. And then I think as a quality assurance, you think about it, we talk about AI at the point of care, where you need to have that for a lot of things. Like, for example, if you're going to be doing rule out PE or pneumoperitoneum or anything acute, you need to be at the point of care. But there are many things, perhaps you can use it as a QA. And there are some companies that are doing that now, where the radiologist reads the reports and nothing changes, but then using a language processing, it looks at the radiology report and it runs a AI program to look for lung nodules, let's say, as a good example. And then if it sees a difference between the radiologist's report, the radiologist says nothing, and the computer says something, then someone will then look at those images. So in a sense, it's a very interesting way of doing the ultimate quality assurance, getting the best of both worlds, but not slowing down the radiologist. There is a lot of concern about slowing down the radiologist. I think one of the things with AI, it's going to have to be very easy to use. And what I mean by that is it can't be obtrusive. If it slows you down a lot, it's going to be very problematic. I think people are not going to want to use it. So you need to figure out a way where AI has the advantage of AI, also not obtrusive. Linda Chu is writing a paper. We did a survey. Many of you from CTisus answered that survey. We were looking at what people are willing to put up with. Like, for example, I remember doing lung nodule detection years ago with early AI, and it would show 60 nodules every case. Well, that was worthless. I'm not going to look at every 60 points. It would take me an hour to read a case. But, what are people willing to put up with? If I'm looking for pancreatic cancer, if it overcalls something 1 in 10 times, is that okay? Or 1 in 5 times, is that okay? Or 1 in 20 times? If it asks me to look at something carefully, am I going to spend so much time looking, or is it going to show me so many false positives? I don't know the answer. Remember, the balance is between false positives and false negatives. That becomes a very, very important issue. So we need to be really careful in that regard. How do we do those things, and how do we do them well? So that's something we are looking at very, very carefully. So now it's kind of a good time to ask questions. I don't really see any questions from anybody. Maybe it's too early in the morning. Maybe everybody is in the holiday spirit. I think, it's kind of funny. At the holiday time, everyone gets in the holiday spirit of things, and like I said, all of the usual things we used to. But being the holiday, but not in the holiday spirit, there's nothing kind of more of a bummer. So I think people, though we are looking at our CTisus numbers, they're really high. People are in the need of education, so we are continuing to do that. So I guess what I'll do is I'll just call it a day. We're out of time, and if anyone has any questions, if you watch this later, you have any specific questions on AI and what we're recommending you read or what you look at, just take us a note and I'll look back at the questions. And with that, have a great day.